We'll be starting in next 2 minutes. Hello everyone, good evening. Today's topic is CNS examination. I know it's a really difficult topic for most of us. I'm Abhilash Singh, second year MBBS student, and I am the chief event coordinator at Clincase, and I'll be moderating today's session for you all. I request everyone to mute themselves throughout the session, please. Okay, so along with us, we have Smriti Venkatesh, who's also chief event coordinator and will be co-moderating the event with me. We have Ishita Gupta, who is Chief Administrative Head, and she'll be handling the PPT for today's session. Today with us, we have Dr. Iftikhar Khadas sir, who is pursuing residency in MD Medicine at JSS Medical College. He completed his MBBS from MGM Medical College batch 2014. He has always been an excellent academic student, and guess what? Along with this, he's a great footballer. He loves teaching and always helping students in one way or the other. So let's get started with the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, everyone. So today's topic is CNS examination. It's difficult to cover up in a certain amount of time, but history is equally important as examination because CNS, the thing is, you can't rely on investigations, neither CT nor MRI. So your history taking should be like a story. It should be, you should express it as a story. And also, after your end of HOPI or even negative history, you should reach to an appropriate diagnosis and you should correlate your HOPI with your examination, which I'll be doing it simultaneously. Okay, so before starting, just the basic concepts of CNS, because CNS is all about neuroanatomy, physiology, and all about basics. So you should be very thorough about it. So the thing is, you should know about white matter and gray matter. As you know, neuron has a cell body and an axons, which carry other impulses away from the neuron. So the cells, the neuron which has nuclei in it, that part is called as your gray matter. Basically, collection of cell bodies of neuron is your gray matter. And the axons which carries your signals from CNS to the peripheries, those are your white matter. So basically your spinal tracts, your spinothalamics, all the tracts are your white matter. Okay. Second thing I want to tell you is basics, the layers of meninges. Important, very important. From outside to inside, it is DAP, which is dura mater, arachnoid matter, and pia mater. Why I'm telling it's important is because subarachnoid space contains your vessels, your arteries, your anterior cerebral artery, middle or internal carotid artery branches. Everything is present in subarachnoid space. Final year's correlation for NEET, subarachnoid space hemorrhage, you detect on CSF as xanthochromasia. That is okay. Next thing you need to know is where are the veins present in the CNS. Veins are present between your dura mater. Okay, it's attached to your skull. Dura mater has basically two layers, meningeal layer and endosteal layers. In between them, the venous sinuses are there. Now, the whole thing about CNS is the most of the cases in clinical practice will be stroke. You need to know what is stroke. Stroke, there are two types. The type will explain what is stroke. Okay, there is a thrombus. Imagine there is ischemic stroke and hemorrhagic stroke. Okay, ischemic stroke can be a thrombotic or an embolic stroke, and hemorrhagic is just an artery which is bleeding. Either way, this is the vessel. Here is the part which is supplying, this vessel is supplying this part. One of it got occluded. This part won't receive blood supply. Okay, so this is occluding the distal part. So this is your ischemic stroke. It could be either due to thrombus, which is building up slowly and slowly, or it could be embolic, some heart issue. The clot is traveling from elsewhere and coming to CNS and blocking this artery. That is called as embolic stroke. So ischemic stroke consists of thrombotic and embolic stroke. Okay, and if the vessels bleed, which happens usually in trauma or hypertensive bleeds, this is hemorrhagic stroke. Okay, so we'll move forward to the history. This was the basic of CNS, or you must know. One more concept you must know is what is nuclei and what is ganglia. Okay, so collection of cell bodies or collection of gray matter inside the CNS is your nuclei. Okay, so facial nerve nuclei, your trigeminal nerve nuclei, because it is present in central nervous system. Okay, so that is nuclei. And if I call it, if the ganglia present outside CNS, like in spinal cord or beside spinal cord, it is called as ganglia. So you call it autonomic ganglia or parasympathetic ganglia or sympathetic ganglia or ciliary ganglia. That is the basics of CNS. Okay, now we'll move to history part. So this is the case presentation. See, it's a 61 years old senior partner. So in the history taking, the only thing you add in CNS is handedness. This is very important because a right-sided or a right-handed person he'll be left dominant in 95% of the cases. Okay, and if he's a lefty, 50% of the times it is right-sided which is controlling the brain, and 50% it's left side which is controlling the brain. So in three things you need to know in stroke. History taking. First, with history, you have to know whether it's ischemic or hemorrhagic stroke, because the treatment matters. If you misdiagnose it as hemorrhagic stroke, because there is something called as thrombolysis of the stroke. You can thrombolize ischemic stroke, but you cannot thrombolize hemorrhagic stroke. Why? Because if there is a clot in the artery, you thrombolize, it will be helpful. But if there is a bleeding from that artery, and that clot is preventing that bleed, and if you thrombolize, the patient will bleed more, the patient will die. So that's why history is very important. So your first aim in history taking is you must differentiate between ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke. How? The patient will come with the complaints of severe headache, severe vomiting, and loss of consciousness will be there. That will suggest that the patient has hemorrhagic stroke. Hemorrhagic stroke is less common. It is around 10%. Ischemic is 85%. Okay. So most of the times you won't get history of severe headache and all. So that will point towards your hemorrhagic stroke. Second point in the history, you should know, second aim of your CNS examination or history is you must know which artery is involved in stroke, which is either anterior cerebral artery or middle cerebral artery or posterior cerebral artery. How will you come to know? You should know about circle of Willis for that. We'll discuss it subsequently. Okay. The third aim of the CNS history taking is you must know which part of the brain is involved. Whether you go from outside to inside, that will be your negative history. Whatever I'm telling you, the third aim is your negative history. You start from outside, you start from scalp. So any trauma history you ask, then you go for meningeal history, then you go for your cerebral history, then subcortical, your basal ganglia history, then cerebellar history, then brainstem history, and later on you can ask your cardiovascular history. That I'll explain it later why. So whenever you're explaining this history taking, your sentence should be weakness started from left upper limb or lower limb. You should, so here only the importance, each and every sentence has an importance, okay? So while eating breakfast around 9 a.m., he experienced sudden weakness in the left upper and lower limb. Left hand, left-sided facial droop was there. So we'll just decode it. It's simple. Why is it important? Why I told you which artery is involved, you should come to know. So let's see the functions of each lobe. Frontal lobe, it's fine. See, frontal lobe, all your motor functions are there. Whatever I'm saying or I'm moving, that is by your frontal lobe. Okay. Whatever sensory I'm sensing it, that is parietal lobe. Okay. Whatever you are hearing, it is temporal lobe. Whatever I'm smelling is temporal lobe. My memory also, it's temporal lobe. Occipital is your visual. Okay. So if the patient comes to you with the complaints of left upper and lower limb, so the thing is, see, your body is represented in the brain, inside the brain. Okay. Your center part of the brain, your lower limb is represented in the middle. Okay. And your upper limb is represented at the sides. Why is it important? I'll just relate. Right now it's confusing. I'll clear it out. See, your internal carotid artery is coming from arch of aorta. Okay. It is going up. It's dividing into internal carotid and external carotid artery. Your internal carotid artery is going up to the brain. It is dividing into smaller anterior cerebral artery and larger middle cerebral artery. So this makes your anterior circulation of the brain. So your anterior part is done of circle of Willis. Your posterior part now, your vertebral arteries are coming. They are joining to form basilar artery. Basilar artery is going up and it is dividing into posterior cerebral artery. Okay, so that completes your circle of Willis with anterior artery giving anterior communicating branch and posterior cerebral artery is giving posterior communicating arteries. So whenever you divide stroke, it is stroke in anterior circulation and stroke in posterior circulation. Okay, so I told you your anterior cerebral artery will supply your medial side of the brain in the center. If you cut your brain, there is paracentral lobule is there. It supplies ACA supply. Your lateral side of the brain, it's representations of upper limb and it is supplied by middle cerebral artery. So if the patient comes to you with the complaints of predominant upper limb weakness, you should keep in mind middle cerebral artery is involved. Why? Because MCA is supplying here and brain representation of upper limb is laterally, not medially. If the patient comes to you with the presentation of weakness of lower limb, right lower limb, you should have that in mind. His anterior cerebral artery is involved and medial side of the brain is involved. So that's your second aim of history taking, like which artery is involved and which lobe is involved. You will come to know by these symptoms. So whenever you're describing it, facial nerve involvement, I'll tell you how it is involved. Slurring of speech and difficulty in swallowing is there. His wife spotted a sudden onset of symptoms and immediately called for an ambulance, which arrived within 15 minutes. Mr. Kumar was diagnosed with hypertensive grade 1 5 years ago. He's pre-diabetic diagnosed, that is not required. So basically, when you are saying which, now you localized, there is no history of headache or vomiting. So you came to know it is an ischemic stroke. Then there is weakness of upper and lower limb both. So this history it will be either predominantly upper lobe involvement or predominantly lower lobe involvement. So you'll come to know ACA or MCA is involved. This much part is done. If there is loss of consciousness, you better ask for, it's like history taking. So you ask consciousness was lost for how much time, he was taken to a local doctor or no, after how long he regained consciousness. So that is important. And when he had when he was conscious, whether he had a trauma or no, because trauma can also associate. So now negative history is very important. This negative history will correlate with examination. Okay. So first, while taking negative history, I told you will go from outside to inside. You take meningeal history first, scalp. Any history of trauma is there or no? You ask. Your negative history started from there. Then you go for cortical history. Your each lobe negative history should be there. So that will be your negative history of cerebrum. Okay. So you ask whether he had loss of consciousness or no. Second thing you ask whether he had headache or no. Third thing you ask is whether there was seizure associated with hemiplegia or hemiparesis or no. Why seizure is important in CNS and hemiplegia is, if seizure is followed by hemiplegia or hemiparesis, it is called as Todd's paralysis. Okay. If seizure is after your hemiplegia, it doesn't have any significance. It only means your cortex, some problem is there in your cortex. So that's why the sequence is important. Seizure came first, or your hemiplegia or hemiparesis came first. Okay. Then third thing you ask is, in your cerebrum is any motor involvement and sensory. That is fine. Bladder and bowel involvement is important in cerebral history. I told you there is center of the brain. ACA supplies paracentral lobule. So it supplies your bladder and bowel. Again, it is lower limb only. It is medial side of the brain only. So you ask history of any bowel or bladder involvement in your negative history of cerebrum. Next, you ask negative history of motor system. It's easy. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe. It is divided by central sulcus. So in front of central sulcus, there is precentral gyrus, and behind central sulcus is postcentral gyrus. So your motor system is present in frontal lobe. Area number 4, which you say is, that is your motor area, which is present in frontal lobe. So you have to take negative history of motor system now. So how do you take negative history of motor system? It is easy. Upper limb, lower limb, proximal muscles, distal muscles. So 4 things you ask. For upper limb, distal muscles, you ask him whether he was able to hold his pen or write his pen after write anything after that event, whether he was able to button or unbutton or no. For proximal muscle, you ask whether he was able to comb his hair or no after the event. Your lower limb distal muscles, you ask whether there was any slipping of chappal was there or no. So that suggests distal muscles weakness. Or climbing, he was able to climb stairs or no, or he was able to get down or no. For proximal muscles of lower limb, you ask whether he was able to get up from squatting position. Most of the Indians have Indian toilets, so you ask that history. So that will be your negative history of motor system. We'll correlate it with motor examination while we do. This is history, so you have to ask the questions, leading questions. Then you take negative history of sensory examination, sensory system. How do you take sensory? Sensory system starts from your parietal lobe. I told you central sulcus divides. So in front it's motor area, behind it's postcentral gyrus is your parietal area or parietal lobe, which is sensory area. Sensory system is present in parietal lobe. So whenever you are asking negative history of sensory system, you are examining parietal lobe. Whenever you are examining while performing, so you are examining parietal lobe. So negative history of sensory system is, it can be positive sensory system, it can be negative sensory system. Quite easy. Positive is something which you are adding, negative is something which you are losing. So numbness of an area is something which you are losing. So it is negative sensory system symptom. And positive is tingling and pain. So you ask that. Then you take negative history of cranial nerves. This is history. So you ask whether there was any deviation of angle of mouth or while talking, whether he was able to speak, whether blurring of vision was there or no, whether he was able to swallow or no. So indirectly asking each and every cranial nerve. So you took cranial nerve history. Cranial nerves are present in brain stem. This is very important. Cranial nerve arises, first and second arise from your cortex, third and fourth from midbrain, next 4 from pons, and the last 4 from medulla. So now, whenever there is a stroke for final years, whenever there is stroke, there is involvement of facial nerve. So even when the artery involved is present in cortex, what explains when facial nerve is arising from your pontomedullary junction, which is present in basal or your brain stem. But even when the stroke is present in the cortex, facial nerve is involved. Why? Because even though the nuclei are present in brainstem, The control of facial nerve is done by your cortex via internal capsule. So wherever the stroke of internal capsule is there, your facial nerve will get involved, even though cranial nerves are arising from brainstem. Okay, so that's why cranial nerve history is important. Next, you'll take negative history of cerebellum. Cerebellum functions you should know. It's okay if you don't know, also you read. It's you ask any history of any involuntary movements and ataxia was there or no after the event. So that will include your negative history of cerebellum and basal ganglia. Next, you ask the history of any fever was there or no, projectile vomiting was there or no. This I'm asking because of meninges only. Last, you ask any cardiovascular involvement was there or no, or any cardiac involvement was there or no, because atrial fibrillation, heart stasis is there, clot is formed, embolus goes to brain, there is stroke. That's why cardiac history is important in CNS. Okay, so after this history taking, after this HOPI, now we'll move on to examination. So your negative history, whatever headings were there, the same headings will be there for your examination. So your examination will start with cerebrum. So how do you examine cerebrum? You can move the slide now. Next. Next. Again, next. Next. Yeah. So how do you examine cerebrum? So this is higher mental functions. What you call is higher mental functions. So either you do, there is a mnemonic, you first look for consciousness. You look consciousness via Glasgow Coma Scale. We don't have much time to discuss. You just go and read. Final years, there's new thing now. There is GCSP, Glasgow Coma Scale pupils now. Go and read about that. Okay, and for NEET also. Second thing is you look for orientation. Why orientation is important? Orientation, you ask where are you, what is your name, and what time is it. It is important because orientation to time, place, and person. This sequence is important. If stroke is there, the first thing to lose is time. The patient will lose orientation to time. Second, he'll lose place, and third, he'll lose person. So while reversing, while he's getting better, the sequence is opposite. First, person will recover, then place, and then time. The last to come recover is time. Then you remember the mnemonic BMI shape. What this is BMI. So B for behavior. You look for his behavior. M is for your memory. Your memory is stored. I told you your recent memory is stored in your hippocampus, which is present in temporal lobe, and your old memory is stored in this prefrontal cortex, which is your frontal lobe. So both are required for memory. Third thing you ask is intelligence. BMI, behavior, memory, intelligence. So you just ask him, in case of fire, what will you do? Okay. Then shape, S for speech. Speech is important. I'll tell you later why. H is for, again, shape, handedness. A is for agnosias or apraxias. So these are definitions. Your book definitions, you must know what is agnosia and what is apraxia. Okay. Then P is for personality. Shape. A is for P, and E is for emotional or emotional quotient. So you must have seen the movie Joker. He laughs at inappropriate moments, right? That is called as pseudo-bulbar affect. It's not effect, it is affect. So that's why you look for that. Okay, so if you can't assess that, this is a simple thing, mini mental state examination. To be honest, we don't assess higher mental functions much. Okay, because the patient is usually conscious or either he is comatose. If hemorrhagic stroke case come, he is comatose. So most of the cases, higher mental functions cannot be assessed. That is our dialogue which we say here. Okay, so if you can't do that BMI shape thing, this is the easiest way to do it. This is mini mental state examination, also known as Falstein's test. Okay, so this is for NEET. Falstein's is for NEET. So you ask, it's the same thing will come over here. You remember the mnemonic oral, O-R-R-A-L. So it is orientation. So you ask, where are you? What time is it? Which day is it? Which year is it? Which floor of the hospital you are? What is the weather right now and all. So that you give a score. Then you give registration. You tell him 3 things and you carry on with your attention and calculation. For calculation, you just tell him, give 100, tell him to -7, then 93 he'll say. Then tell him -7. So he'll say 86 or whatever it is. So that is your attention and calculation. Now recall. So whatever you have told in registration, 3 things, tell him to recall it again. So you are asking for, you are just checking his registration as well as recall. So MMSC less than 21 will suggest like whether he has dementia or no. Again, same thing. We don't use it in our clinical life. This is only theoretical. People or examiners love to ask this many mental state examination. Next slide. Again, the last part is oral. I told you, no, ORRAL. So this is language. Language is not something which you speak. Language definition is writing, reading, obeying commands, drawing. So you tell him to draw a pentagon. You tell him to speak something, repeat something. Tell him to take a book, fold it into half, or tear a page. So that will assess your language. You tell him to speak something like no ifs, ands, or buts. It's written here. Or yeah, you can say any phrase which is difficult to speak, and they'll say. You calculate the score accordingly. Each oral has different scores. Language has 10, so you add, and it's out of 30. Next slide. Then you come to examination of motor system. I told you negative history is examination of, in the negative history I told you one system is examination of motor system. So now while examining, you just confirm it, like his motor system is involved. So this concept is very important. It's actually examination of motor system. Okay. So you must know what is upper motor neuron and what is lower motor neuron. Okay. So what is upper motor neuron? So for example, I'm moving my hand like this. So the command starts from area number 4. I told you motor area starts in frontal lobe. So command starts there. So it is coming down to spinal cord, and spinal cord is doing this thing for me, for my brain. Okay. So the starting point of upper motor neuron is pyramidal cells of Betz. That is the neurons which is present in your this frontal lobe. So from there till spinal cord, there is something called as anterior horn cell in spinal cord. Spinal cord has 2 parts. Anterior 2/3, it's your anterior part, and posterior 1/3 is your posterior. So anterior horn cell is obviously present in anterior part. So that neuron will come and relay here in anterior horn cells. So from there to here in the spinal cord, that is your upper motor neuron. Okay. And from anterior horn cells to your peripheries, over here from the spinal cord till my here, that is my LMN. So the thing is, if the lesion is in spinal, as in cortex, the lesion, the manifestations will be of upper motor neuron disorders. What is upper? U for up. Everything will go up, as in reflexes will be hyperreflexia, tone will be increased hypertonia, then your spasticity will be there, and your reflexes are exaggerated. Hyperreflexia will be there. Okay. Lower motor neuron is just the opposite. It is reflex will be absent. Okay, your tone will be low. Your reflexes also, this is absent only. Your weakness will be of element, right? Power will be low. There the power will be okay. Okay, so that's why it is important. So if I tell you there is a stroke of cerebral cortex, so your lesion will be upper motor neuron. So when you say upper motor neuron, while examining, you keep that in mind. Like the stroke is in cortex. By negative history, you figured like a stroke is in frontal lobe. So now you expect all the findings to increase. So when you examine first, what consists of motor examination is 5 things. First, nutrition. Second, tone. Third, power. Fourth, any involuntary movements. Fifth is your coordination, which is cerebellum. Many people include reflexes also here only in motor examination. So one by one, nutrition. How do you look for nutrition? It's simple. Take a measuring tape. You elbow 4 inches above elbow. You measure it right side, left side. Elbow above, same 4 inches above. Measuring tape, cross tape method. You compare right and left. Lower limb nutrition. How do you check? Above knee, it is 6 to 7 inches, and below knee, it's 4 inches. Again, same. So you both the sides you compare. So they'll ask you I won't discuss the causes. I'll just tell you what all to read because we don't have much time. So you go and read. They'll ask you what are the causes of increased nutrition or hypertrophy of muscles. There is something called as hypertrophy and there is something called as pseudo hypertrophy. Final years, Duchenne muscular dystrophy produces pseudo hypertrophy and hypothyroidism also. You read about that. Then they'll ask you in which condition there is wasting of muscles. So that will come to know from nutrition. Usually in lower motor neuron lesions. If I say low motor neuron lesions, matlab this means this problem is in spinal cord or peripheral nerve. The problem is not in the cortex. The problem is not in the brain. The problem is in the spinal cord or the nerves, vessels, nerves arising from spinal cord. Okay, so that is first part. Nutrition got covered. They'll ask you those questions only. Where do you look for wasting of muscles? This is the thenar muscles, hypothenar muscles, your webs, okay, your temporal fossa, your buccal fossa. So these are the places where you look for wasting of muscles. Usually lower motor neuron lesions will present to you as wasting of muscle. Second thing you look is tone. It is very easy to look for tone. You just hold a muscle. First they'll ask you definition of tone. Second thing you do just passive movements. You take the hand of the patient or leg of the patient and you examine yourself and you see if you're checking biceps, you just do this. Okay. You just passively take us and you look for tone. You compare it on right and left sides. So what is hypertonia? What is hypotonia? They'll ask you the causes of hypotonia. Okay, they'll ask you the causes of hypertonia. I just told you if the stroke is present in the brain, you will find increased tone. Hypertonia you will find. Okay, so hypertonia, there are two types. One is spasticity and rigidity. So spasticity, hypertonia, what is spasticity? Two things you must know, which is clasp knife spasticity and rigidity. You should know two things actually. It is lead pipe and cogwheel. Definition read, where is it seen? You read, that is theoretical. Okay, the causes of hypotonia also they'll ask. Next is your power. Theory, power grading. They love asking power grading, okay, for some reason. You must know. So for power, same thing. You go from either distal to proximal for upper limb and lower limb both. This is very simple. You start from this thumb, okay. Thumb has movements. The tone, for tone, you did yourself, right? For power, the patient, you have to test with resistance. When patient will do the work, you just have to give resistance. So for that, you must know the functions of each muscles. Thumb moves either like this or it will move like this. So you check, you give resistance, tell the patient to move the thumb in opposite direction. You start with thumb, then you do your interossei. Okay, you check for your interossei. You take a paper, you keep it paper like this over here. The paper will be like this, and even the examiners should hold that paper in the same two fingers which patient is holding and compare that. You try to take that paper from his hand. If he's giving up easily, which means he has interossei weakness. Then you look for wrist, examination of wrist. Okay, same thing, flexion, extension. Keep your hand here, tell him to flex, you tell him to extend. Simple. Same for elbow, here against resistance, Then shoulder you take, okay. Shoulder, tell him to abduct first. There are many movements of shoulders. So you keep your hand here, tell him to abduct like this, against resistance. For adduction, tell the patient to keep hand like this and you give resistance and tell him to bring the hand closer to your body. So that is your power of upper limb. So it is graded from 0 to 5. It is given by MMRC. Go and read the grading of power. Okay. For examination of power of truncal muscles. Okay. The patient is lying down on bed. You keep a hand over here on the forehead. Tell him to lift his head. Okay. That way you are checking the power of your truncal muscles. Okay. Then lower limb, same thing. Start with your great toe. Tell them to dorsiflex against resistance or plantar flex against resistance. I won't be able to demonstrate. The same thing with the knee and the same thing with hip. Like how I told you to abduct the shoulder, just like that patient is lying down, you tell to abduct the hip outside, take the entire leg or lift the entire leg from the bed and you keep resistance on it, whether he's able to lift or no. Okay, it's better if you see a video. I have, if you want, I'll share. Okay, so later on you take that video of how to examine power. Okay, then I told you the next thing you examine in motor examination is your involuntary movements. If it's there, you must know the definitions of tremor. What is tremor? What is intent types of tremors? What is chorea? What is athetosis? What is hemibalismus? This is more for final years. I'm telling third and final years. These definitions you must know, causes you must know, and which nuclei is involved. It is easy. Remember the mnemonic GAP, GAP. So globus pallidus for athetosis. Chorea, C for C. It is caudate nuclei. Caudate nuclei is basal ganglia. Third thing you remember, hemibalismus is subthalamic nuclei. Again, basal ganglia. So next part, now the important part while examining motor examination is your cerebellum. Remember, when you are grading power, if your grading is more than 3/5, only then you can assess cerebellum. If you assess cerebellum in a hemiplegic person, they'll fail you, because you cannot examine only. For performing cerebellar functions, your power should be okay. So basics, you must know what is hemiplegia, what is hemiparesis. Hemiplegia means power is 0/5. He can't move his limb. Hemiparesis, his power may be 2, 3 or 4. There is weakness. What is paraplegia? Paraplegia is lower limb. What is monoplegia? Single limb. There is something called as tetraplegia for final years. So all your 4 limbs are involved, which is quadriplegia plus trunk. That is your tetraplegia. Okay. So the next part you examine is cerebellum. Cerebellum is very important. Okay. I told you the first prerequisite is power more than 3. You remember the mnemonic Danish, DANISH. D. So cerebellum. If you want to become a choose neuro, you will see 3 parts are there of cerebellum. 1, center, there is vermis. Each part has different functions. Central part, vermis. So you tell the patient to get up from the bed. If he is able to get up on his own, his vermis is okay, because central part of the cerebellum controls balance. So balance as in your truncal balance. Okay. Second part of cerebellum is flocculonodular lobe, if you have read anatomy. So that is for your main balance. Okay. So your vestibulocochlear nerve is attached to flocculonodular lobe. So you just look for nystagmus. You hold the hand and you just look for nystagmus. Third is you check for cerebellar hemispheres. So what is the function of cerebellar hemisphere? It is Danish. Okay, that's how you remember. So you tell them to do dysdiadokinesia. This is dysdiadokinesia. Rapid movement. Okay, if he's able to do, his cerebellum is okay. A for ataxia. Tell him to walk. His gait will be wide-based. N is nystagmus. You already saw it. I is for any involuntary movements. You look for any involuntary movements. S is for speech. So in the speech gets affected in cerebellum, because cerebellum, the fibers cross. It's okay. So there are 2 types of cerebellar speech. One is staccato speech and one is scanning speech. If you tell him to name something, for example, Ishita. Okay, so he'll say Ishita. That is your scanning. And if it's staccato, he'll be like Ishita. So every syllable is separated by a pause. That is your speech in cerebellum. H is for hypotonia. I told you, hypotonia means the lesion is not in cerebellum. So hypotonia cerebellum. There are many other signs, but at your level, final year must know what is rebound phenomena of Gordon-Holmes. So apart from that, and there is macrographia in cerebellum. If you tell them to write their name, they'll write in big handwriting. So which means one more differentiating feature is, if your left side of the brain is involved in the stroke, your right side of the body is affected, right? In cerebellum, if your left-sided cerebellum is affected, your left-sided body is affected. Same side. Because the crossing has already occurred in medulla. Okay, the fibers are crossed in cerebellum, is not crossed in cerebellum. So that was your motor examination. Next slide. Exam point of view, motor examination is the most important. So this is the continuation of, I told you lateral cerebellar hemisphere, you need to look for Danish, which is your near cerebellum. Next slide. Your vermis, I told you, truncal ataxia. You tell them to get up. And the flocculonodular lobe, I told you, look for nystagmus. It's easy. Next. This is sensory examination. Okay, so when I was examining motor examination, indirectly, what was I looking for? I was looking for frontal lobe. Now, when I'm examining sensory examination, I'm indirectly looking for my parietal lobe. So my sensory examination, first I'll examine sensory system is not just present. The higher center function is basically the headquarter is present in parietal lobe. But there are other things which are also working for sensory examination, like spinal cord is working, your spinothalamic tracts are working, your other tracts are there which are working, right? So you need to examine that too. So your sensory examination is also, this cranial nerve is different, okay? The sensory examination cranial nerve is different. So in sensory examination, there are superficial examination or superficial sensory examination. There is deep sensory examination, and there is separate examination for sensory to look for parietal lobe functions, which is called as cortical sensations or cortical sensory examination. So now, how do you look for peripheral sensory examination, which is the function of spinal cord and peripheral nerves? Simple. 3, you remember 6, 3 plus 3. First is superficial touch, pain and temperature. So whether he is able to, you take a pen, you must know dermatomes, okay? What all dermatomes are important, I'll tell you. C1, there is no C1 dermatome. C2 is important, which is your occiput. C3 and C4. C4 is your shoulder tip, okay? Your thumb is C5. Your middle finger is C6. Your little finger is C7. Okay. Then your C7, T1 is coming here. Don't remember T1. Remember nipples T4. Then xiphoid process is T6. Your umbilicus is T8. Or then your inguinal ligament is T10. Okay. Your umbilicus is actually T10, and your inguinal ligament then goes T12 like that. Okay, then the lower limb also, you remember only S1. S1 is important because it will come in reflexes, and knee is L2. Okay, so whenever you are examining for sensory, your eyes must be closed. Okay, your patient eyes, not yours. Okay, so you take a pen, you touch the pen, or you look for touch sensations in those dermatomes which I have mentioned. So upper limb, right, left, lower limb, right, left. Abdomen also. So you look for touch, you look for pain. You take a pen, you just press it deep, okay, and you assess whether the patient has pain or no. So while you are assessing touch, pain, and temperature, you are assessing his or her spinothalamic tract, because pain and temperature is carried by anterior spinal or lateral spinothalamic tract. The crude touch, okay. So then the next thing you look is for your deep sensations, which is vibration, proprioception, and pressure. So now the same pen, you just press it deeper. So that will, in the same dermatomes, same criteria, eyes of the patient closed, same dermatomes. That's how you assess pressure. Or you just squeeze the Achilles tendon. That will be your, then vibration. Your tunic fork must be 128. You explain the patient like this is the vibration, this is how you will feel. Tell him to close his eyes, and same dermatomes, okay, or bony prominences. Vibration, final years need first sensation to lost in diabetes. Diabetes is prone to cause peripheral neuropathies. So first sensation is that. Okay, then I told this is the touch. For temperature, you either rub your hands and touch him, again same criteria, or you get a test tube which is hot and cold water. So you assess temperature that way. If these are intact, which means his spinal cord and peripheral nerves are intact. Now how will you assess the sensory function of your parietal lobe? 6 things are there. 1-point discrimination, 2-point discrimination, stereognosis, barognosis, graphesthesia, and sensory extension. You read it out, it's there in every book. You just take a protractor which has 2 points and then just increase the distance. Again, same thing, eyes closed. That is 1 point and 2 point discrimination. You draw something on his back and tell him whether he can recognize or no. That is graphesthesia. Then something called a stereognosis. Don't tell him what you're giving. His eyes are closed. Just give him a key, a pen, or a bottle and see whether he's able to identify or no. Last second, then that is stereognosis. Then there is something called as cortical extension. So basically, when you give him stimulus at the same time, whether you touches both the shoulders at the same time, he won't be able to recognize. But if you do it individually, he'll be able to recognize. That is your sensory extension. And last is in sensory system is your paragnosis. So what happens is, if you tell him, like, tell me approximately weight of this speaker or anything, water bottle, he won't be able to recognize. So that completes the sensory examination. The most important of them all is examination of cranial nerves. Okay, sensory, again, rarely you have to do it, but most of the times the patient will complain of motor involvement. So your examination of motor system is important. Examination of cranial nerves now, last part. Okay. First cranial nerve is olfactory. You must know what are the different cranial nerves. Same thing. Olfactory nerve is pure sensory. Eyes are closed. One nostril closed. Tell him, give him a tea or a coffee smell. Okay, carry tea or anything. Don't carry something which has ammonia or onions. Or what happens is, you have to stimulate cranial nerve 1. If you give onion, for example, his fifth cranial nerve will get irritated, and you'll assess the function of fifth cranial nerve and not first cranial nerve. Tell him to identify whether it's a tea or coffee. That's it. Okay. He must only say he can smell something. If he doesn't identify, it's okay. One nostril at a time, one nostril close. Okay. Optic nerve, 5 things. That visual acuity, that is done by Snellen's chart. Second is your near vision, which is done by Jaggers. Third is confrontation. You just read about confrontation method. I won't be able to demonstrate right now. Fourth is your fundoscopy. You're not supposed to do it. And the last part is, the last thing you assess is reflexes. Reflexes is very important. Direct reflex, indirect reflex, accommodation reflex. They'll ask you the causes of each. So that is how you assess for optic nerve. And last, color vision also. Okay. Optic nerve is all about theory. You need to know what are the pathways of light reflexes, indirect, direct, accommodation. Okay. Next slide. So 3, 4, and 6. You examine 3, 4, and 6 together. You hold his head like this. You take your finger. You're keeping the head because he has to move his eyes, not his head. Because generally, if you tell them to move their eye to your finger, they'll move their head along with it. So make sure you keep a hand on your head and make it stabilize it. Then you check in 9 directions, from center, here, there, this corner, that corner, in 9 directions. Okay. So you're checking the reflexes. Along with that, you must look for any ptosis is there or no, which is very important. The oculomotor nerve and all. For oculomotor nerves, ptosis will be there. So 3, 4, 6 are examined together. Next. Next slide. Okay. I'll just explain. The slide is not moving. So next is fifth cranial nerve. Same thing. Just remember, angle of mouth is not supplied by trigeminal nerve. From scalp to here, everything is supplied by sensory system is supplied by trigeminal nerve, except angle of mouth, which is angle of your mandible, which is supplied by greater auricular nerve. Okay. That is your fifth. Same thing. You get a test tube filled with hot water and cold water. You just check on the dermatomes, all the 3 parts of cranial nerve, 5. So V1, V2, and V3. You check for sensations here. You touch here, right, left, right, left, right, left. Okay. So that is your trigeminal nerve. That is the sensory part. Motor part is your motor part will be your muscles of mastication. That's it. You tell him to whether he's able to chew or no food. Next slide. Yeah, the same thing. Sensory function you examine by touching in the 3 regions. and the motor is by your same thing. And one of the reflexes also, I forgot to mention about the reflexes. We'll do a reflexes afterwards, after this. Next nerve. Next is facial nerve. So basically your stroke, this examination is very important. They'll ask you facial nerve only, for whether you are third year, final year or second year also they'll ask you. Facial nerve has 4 components. One is motor, one is sensory, one is autonomic, and one is your reflexes. So your motor functions, so you start from above, okay? So just remember, your forehead is supplied, it has a dual representation in the brain. Okay, so whenever there is that I'll explain it, upper motor, facial neuron lesion, and lower motor, that is okay. So you tell the patient to look on the ceiling. You look for frowning here, first thing. Second thing is tell the patient to close his eyes, and you give resistance and tell him to keep the eyes closed. If the eyebrows are getting, if the eyelid is getting lifted easily, which means there is a facial nerve involvement is there. You look for angle of mouth, whether they are on the same level or no. If there is deviation, it will be pulled here or pulled there. Okay, you look for that. Nasolabial fold will be obliterated. You tell them to blow like this, and you push it from here. Okay, the air should not release. That is the funda, or basically the mechanism. He should withhold it. Like the air should not come out. That's it. Then next thing you do is tell him to whistle if he can whistle, so that you are checking buccinator, and tell him to smile if he's able to smile without deviation of angle of mouth, which means his facial nerve is orbicularis or this oris is okay. Okay, so that's how you check for motor functions of cranial nerve 7. Sensory functions you usually don't check because it's a tedious process. Your tongue sensations you have to check. Anterior two-third is supplied by facial nerves, so you have to check your taste sensations for checking the cranial nerve sensory function. Third is reflexes, which is your corneal and this corneal reflex and conjunctival reflex. So okay, next nerve. Vestibulocochlear, you either tell them to, you just bring your watch which has a tick in it, just tell whether he's able to do it or no, or you perform your tuning Fuchs test. Third years better know it. Rene Weber's, Schwabach's. ABCs you don't need to do. Glossopharyngeal and vagus you usually check together, which is gag reflex. You check for gag reflex right side and left side. Don't touch anterior part of the tongue. It's posterior exclusively. Tongue nerve supply is very important. Anterior two-third, facial nerve, posterior part, cranial nerve 9th, posterior most part, vagus. All the 4 nerves you remember. Okay. So next nerve, tell them to swallow. That's it. Give water. Tell them to swallow. You'll check 9, 10, and 11 simultaneously. Next nerve. Accessory, just shrug the shoulders against the resistance. That's it. Hypoglossal nerve. First, look for any wasting is there or no. To look for wasting and fasciculations, you tell the patient to open the mouth. Do not bring the tongue outside. So that's how you assess hypoglossal nerve for upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron. If there is wasting, which suggests LMN lesion. That's it. And if tell them to remove the tongue outside, movements left, right. That's it. That's how you check for hypoglossal nerve. Next, before investigation, the last part is reflexes. Reflexes, I told you. Again, you have to differentiate between UMN and LMN. Hyperreflexia and UMN, hyporeflexia and LMN. So there are superficial reflexes, there are deep reflexes. Superficial reflexes, what all you have to do it, or you have to do is, first you abdominal, okay, your corneal, your conjunctival, these are all your superficial reflexes. But the most important is your plantars, your Babinski sign. What you call it as Babinski sign. So what you do is there's a feet is there. You just hold the feet, plantar flex it, okay, and from the lateral side you take a key and you just come here and you come near the first toe. This is leg, okay, imagine this is leg. You start from here and you end here. You don't come here, okay. So what happens is there will be normally the reflex is like this. This is flexor reflex. So if it is coming extensor like this, which means the lesion is upper motor neuron. The Babinski positive means the lesion is upper motor neuron. Some problem is there in the brain. That's it. That is Babinski. Again, for extra, if you want to study extra, there are different methods. If the leg is amputated, you have to just pinch your tensor fascial lata or anything. You read about Babinski in and out. Okay. Then deep reflexes, simple. You remember 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just mention first what are the deep reflexes: biceps, triceps, your knee, ankle, and jaw jerk. These are your deep reflexes. Now remember 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2 is your root value for ankle. 2, 3, 3, 4 is your root value for knee. Your 5, 6 is your root value for biceps. And 7, 8 is your root value for your triceps. Because these are the favorite questions they'll ask. They'll ask you grade reflexes too. So there are gradings from 0 to 4. Again, 2 is normal, 1 is less, 3 is brisk, 4 is something called as clonus. Final years, clonus, you must know what is clonus. If there is upper motor neuron, it will be hyperreflexia. Either it will be brisk or it will be clonus. There are two types of clonus: ankle clonus and patellar clonus. You must know how to demonstrate. So you read about that, theory purpose. Okay, so this is the proper examination of CNS till now. Last part remaining is you look for signs of meningeal irritation. Okay, so you must know the difference between your CNS proforma. If you see, this is the basics 5 topics which we covered. After that, apart from that, you add signs of meningeal irritation, signs of raised ICT, and peripheral nerve examination if you can do, and gait examination, gait. Okay, so in your signs of meningeal irritation, you should not confuse signs of meningeal irritation with signs of raised intracranial pressure. Simple. If your meninges are getting irritated, 2 signs are there. First, in history, you will find projectile vomiting, fever will be there. Then there is something called as Kernick sign, and there is something called as Brudzinski's sign. There are 4 Brudzinski's sign. Okay, in books they have mentioned 2: Brudzinski's neck sign and Brudzinski's leg sign. There are 2 more: Brudzinski's cheek sign and Brudzinski's pubic sign. So those are the extra signs you should know. Then signs of intracranial raised intracranial tension, which is papilledema or your papillitis or optic atrophy. You won't see that, but you must differentiate between meningeal. Then peripheral nerve examination is important. Leprosy won't be there, not much of importance. And last is gait. Okay, so this will commence. I try to cover almost everything. Not every year or first years will find difficult, second years will find it difficult. But if you go to read now for CNS, what I'll suggest is for basics, you must know neuroanat. Vishram Singh is the best, I feel, for neuroanat. For examination part, there is a manual for exam preparation. You can ask, I'll tell Akatya or Shivani about it. Okay, so you can take that manual, and Balur Clinical is very good for CNS. It has about 200 pages are there. So read about that. Investigations and all, this is regarding stroke only, which we usually don't follow. Circle of Willis, you must know. Apart from that, yeah, that's it about the examination.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I'll hand over to Smriti to conclude the session.
Okay, Ishita, can we please have the question on the screen? Okay, so this is the question sir is given. All those of you who know the answer, please reply on the chat box. So what is the difference between an upper motor neuron lesion and a lower motor neuron lesion? Okay, we're getting many answers. So we've got answers from Reshma, Roshan, Priya, Deepika, Tanya, Abhirami, Anushka, Avinash, Harini, Niyati, Priya, Sharvari, Avni, Sharmila, okay, Tanmay, Megan. All right, all right. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for all your responses, guys. On behalf of the entire team Clinicase, I would like to extend warm thanks to Ifti sir for making today's session very interesting and informative, and for making the dreaded topic of CNS interesting and so easy for all of us to understand. Also, a big thanks to all our members for attending today's session and for being such enthusiastic learners. In case any of you have missed a part of the session or would like to see it again, we will be uploading the recording of today's session on our YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out. Once again, I would like to thank all of you for making today's event a huge success. Signing off, and lots of love, Team Clinicase.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.